Pick that up. Pick it up right now, you filthy old man. Sir, I was only emptying the trash. Shut your mouth. Preston Vance grabbed a half-eaten plate from the nearest table and hurled it toward the janitor. The plate struck the edge of the rolling cart, shattered across the marble floor, and sent grilled salmon and sauce across the old man's chest. Pieces of porcelain scattered around his work boots. There, Preston said. More garbage for you. That's all you're good for. The old man looked down at the food dripping from his clean gray uniform. He did not argue. He knelt, gathered every broken piece, and placed it carefully into the cart. Disgusting, Preston muttered. Several staff members laughed. Not one person in the lobby stepped forward. Not one voice told Preston to stop. What Preston did not know was that the man he had just called garbage owned the entire building. Before the night was over, Preston would lose nearly everything he believed made him important. A few hours earlier, downtown Chicago glowed beneath the fading light of an autumn evening. The sun slipped behind the skyline, washing Meridian Tower in shades of gold and copper. Everett Cole entered through the loading dock and used the service entrance, just as he had done throughout his time on the cleaning crew. His identification badge was clipped to his chest. His work boots were tightly laced, and a rolling trash cart rattled beside him across the concrete floor. Everett was 68 years old. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed silver beard. His gray janitor's uniform was pressed and spotless. There was not a wrinkle on it. His hands were rough, and the skin across his knuckles had cracked after a lifetime of work. Yet the way he carried himself was different from the way most people expected a janitor to walk. His back remained straight, his chin level, and his steps calm. He moved through the loading dock with the same quiet certainty another man might carry into a boardroom. The freight elevator carried him upward, while the smell of floor polish lingered in the air and fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Darius Webb, the night security guard, looked up from his desk and smiled. "Evening, Mr. Cole." Everett nodded. "Evening, Darius. How is your daughter doing? Did she get into that nursing program?" Darius' whole face brightened. "The letter came yesterday. She received a full scholarship." Everett tapped the desk twice with one knuckle. "That is a proud father standing in front of me. Tell her I said congratulations." That was Everett. He knew the janitors, guards, maintenance workers, delivery drivers, and overnight staff by name. He asked about their children. He remembered birthdays, illnesses, graduations, and family problems. He noticed when somebody looked exhausted and when someone was trying to hide bad news. The people who kept Meridian Tower running loved him, not because he gave speeches about dignity, but because he practiced it when no one important was watching. Far above the service halls, another world had gathered inside the same building. The Horizon Foundation's annual charity gala filled the 40th floor. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across white tablecloths. A string quartet performed Vivaldi in one corner. Towers of champagne glittered beside carved ice sculptures. 300 donors in evening gowns and tuxedos moved beneath enormous windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The event was raising money for educational programs, serving children from struggling communities. That purpose mattered, because the people congratulating themselves for helping invisible children were about to ignore an invisible man standing only a few feet away. The person directing the gala was Preston Vance, head of events and operations. He was in his mid-40s, with slicked back hair and an expensive watch that flashed whenever he lifted his wrist. Preston crossed the room as if the entire floor belonged to him. He snapped his fingers at a young black waitress and ordered her to refill his glass. He berated a caterer because a folded napkin had been placed on the wrong side of a dinner plate. Beside him stood Mallory Pierce, Vice President of Donor Relations. She was blonde, polished, and wore a sharp smile that never reached her eyes. She laughed at every cruel remark Preston made and dismissed service workers with the movement of one hand, as though shooing away insects. Upstairs, charity had become theater. Wealthy guests praised themselves for caring while the quiet army that prepared the food, removed the waste, polished the floors, guarded the doors, and kept the lights burning remained unseen. During the gala, Everett received a message over his radio. The catering crew had generated far more waste than expected. Bags were overflowing in the service corridor, and someone needed to remove them immediately. Everett did not complain. He loaded clean bags onto his cart, entered the freight elevator, and traveled to the 40th floor. When the doors opened, he pushed the cart along the service hallway. The wheels clicked softly against the tile. Everett moved with his usual calm, keeping close to the wall and disturbing no one. Near the end of the corridor, he paused beside a window. The Chicago skyline stretched beyond the glass, 1,000 lights against the darkening sky. Everett rested both hands on the cart and stared out for a moment. The expression on his face was not fatigue. It was something closer to memory. Then he returned to work. He separated recycling from ordinary trash. He flattened cardboard boxes, tied every bag securely, and wiped a coffee spill from the floor with a cloth from his back pocket. Nobody had asked him to clean that spill. He simply saw it and handled it. On the lobby wall nearby hung a framed black and white photograph from the building's groundbreaking ceremony. It showed a group of men wearing hard hats at a construction site. Near the center stood a younger man with broad shoulders, rolled blueprints beneath one arm, and a confident smile. The younger man looked remarkably like Everett. Everett glanced toward the photograph as he passed. It was only a glance. Then he returned his attention to the cart. Most employees and visitors walked past that picture every day without studying it. If any of them had stopped and read the small brass plate beneath the frame, the rest of the evening would have unfolded very differently. The night turned ugly while Everett was pushing a full cart down the service corridor. The bags were tied securely, and everything had been loaded neatly. He stayed near the wall, moving quietly and remaining out of sight during the live event. But a side door connected the service corridor to the main gala hall. As Everett passed, a young caterer hurried through the doorway carrying an empty silver tray. For only a brief moment, Everett and the cart were visible to the ballroom. 300 guests stood inside. Only one pair of eyes locked onto him with immediate hostility. Preston Vance set his champagne glass down so hard that wine spilled over the rim. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and marched toward Everett with long, deliberate steps. He wanted people to notice. "What are you doing up here?" Everett stopped the cart and answered in a low, even voice. "The catering staff requested a waste pickup. I was told to come now, sir. I do not care who told you what. Service workers do not cross this floor during a live event. You know that." Preston did not lower his voice. He had no desire for privacy. He wanted the nearby donors and employees to hear him. "I apologize," Everett said. "I will be gone in a moment. You will leave now." Preston reached toward the nearest table, seized a half-eaten plate of grilled salmon, and threw it hard in Everett's direction. Everett turned slightly on instinct. The plate struck the metal rim of the trash cart, broke apart, and sent warm fish and glossy sauce across his forearm, sleeve, and chest. A piece of salmon slid down the front of his uniform and landed on his shoe. Porcelain fragments fell onto the marble. "There," Preston said. He wiped his fingers on a cloth napkin and dropped it at Everett's feet. More garbage for the garbage man. Mallory Pierce appeared at Preston's shoulder with a wine glass in one hand. She pressed the other hand against her chest in false surprise and laughed. It was a loud, sharp, theatrical laugh, designed to travel across the room so everyone nearby would understand that Everett's humiliation was now part of the entertainment. 3 staff members stood against the wall. One stared at the floor. Another looked toward the ceiling. The third looked directly at Everett with an expression that may have been pity. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everett wiped the sauce from his forearm with the back of his hand. He looked at the dark stain spreading across the uniform he had carefully ironed before work. He lifted the piece of salmon from his shoe and placed it in the cart. Then he bent down, collected the broken porcelain, and added it to the trash. He gripped the cart handle and started toward the exit. Preston was not finished. He followed Everett across the ballroom with his arms spread and his chin raised, performing for clusters of wealthy donors holding champagne glasses. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston called, "I apologize for this interruption. Can you believe this? We are holding a charity gala for disadvantaged children, and we cannot even keep the janitors from crashing the party." A few guests gave polite, uncertain laughs. Then the laughter spread. A man in a pinstripe suit leaned toward his wife and spoke loudly enough for others to hear. Maybe he thought the gala was being held for him. More laughter followed. It bounced from the marble walls and crystal chandeliers until the entire room seemed filled with it. 300 people were being invited into the same joke. The joke was Everett. His jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck became visible, and his knuckles turned white around the cart handle. He did not turn around. He did not answer. He kept walking. Mallory raised her voice over the crowd. Someone should check whether he even has proper identification. I doubt he is authorized to remain in this building during an evening event. For all we know, he wandered in from the street. Everett stopped. He turned slowly, unclipped the badge from his chest, and held it up where she could see the photograph, his name, and the security clearance. I have worked in this building for 2 years, ma'am. Preston tilted his head and gave him a slow, condescending smile. 2 years doing what? Emptying trash cans, cleaning other people's messes, scrubbing toilets on your hands and knees. He examined Everett from head to toe, the way someone might study something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. That is not a career, old man. That is a life sentence, and you are wearing the uniform to prove it. Mallory pressed her lips together as if trying to contain another smile. She did not try very hard. Several donors exchanged glances. One woman appeared uncomfortable, but she turned away. They all turned away. Everett clipped the badge back onto his chest and turned the cart toward the service corridor. One step followed another. Slow, even, controlled. That should have ended the encounter. It could have become one more cruel moment. People forgot before dessert was served. But Preston Vance did not know how to stop when he believed a weaker person had no power to answer him. As Everett approached the service corridor, Preston picked up a crumpled cocktail napkin and threw it deliberately. It struck Everett between the shoulder blades and dropped to the marble. "You missed one," Preston called. His voice cracked through the room like a whip. 2 younger staff members near the bar watched Preston's face with the anxious attention of people desperate for his approval. They picked up their own crumpled napkins and threw them at Everett. One landed inside the cart. The other struck the side of his face beneath his left eye. Everett stopped and stood completely still. His chest rose and fell. His shoulders were rigid. His hands trembled beside him. The trembling did not come from weakness or age. It came from the force of everything he was holding inside. Then Everett bent down. He collected every piece. The napkin on the floor, the one in the cart, the one that had struck his face. He placed them into the trash bag one at a time, neatly and carefully, as though his dignity were the only possession in the room that no one could take without his permission. Across the ballroom, an elderly white woman in a navy gown watched the entire scene. Her name was Lenora Bishop. She was 73 years old and one of the Horizon Foundation's most loyal donors. The color had drained from her face. Her fingers gripped the stem of her wine glass so tightly that the crystal seemed ready to break. Lenora stepped forward. Mallory reached her immediately and touched her elbow with practiced warmth. "Do not worry, Mrs. Bishop. We are handling it. He should not have been up here. You understand how these situations work." Lenora looked down at Mallory's hand, then raised her eyes to Mallory's face. She said nothing. She did not need to. Her expression was cold, steady, and furious. Everett reached the service elevator and pressed the call button. A soft chime echoed along the corridor. Before the doors opened, Preston planted himself in front of them with his arms crossed. "Where do you think you are going?" "Downstairs, sir. I need to unload the cart." "Not in this elevator. This elevator is for donors and executives, not people like you." Preston pointed toward the far end of the hallway. "Use the stairs." Everett looked at him. "The stairs continue down 12 floors, sir. This cart weighs more than 100 pounds. Preston leaned close enough for Everett to smell champagne and cologne. "Not my problem." He spaced the words as though hammering nails. "You should have considered that before deciding to spend your life as a janitor." Preston turned toward a young white staff member standing near the wall. The young man's face had gone pale, and his eyes were wide. "You, make sure he takes the stairs. If he is not off this floor quickly, write him up. I want it added to his file before the night ends." The young employee swallowed and nodded. He did not look at Everett. Everett stood in silence with his eyes fixed on Preston. His expression remained still, but something changed behind it. It was not anger, and it was not defeat. It was something deeper. The accumulated weight of a lifetime that a man like Preston could never understand because he had never been forced to carry it. Everett pulled the cart away from the elevator. One wheel caught against the marble edge and produced a long, high squeak that traveled down the empty corridor like a cry. He dragged the cart toward the stairwell. Every person nearby heard those wheels. Nobody spoke. The steel fire door slammed behind Everett, and the music vanished. The laughter, champagne, chandeliers, and hundreds of guests disappeared on the other side of the door. Now there was only Everett, an overloaded trash cart, and 12 floors of concrete stairs. A fluorescent light buzzed above the landing. The walls were bare gray cinder block. The air felt cold and damp and carried the smell of old paint and rusted metal. Everett's work boots echoed against every step, a hollow and lonely sound that seemed to have nowhere to go. He gripped the cart handle with both hands and tilted it backward, easing the wheels over the first stair. They caught against the edge. Everett pulled harder. The cart lurched forward and slammed onto the landing with a bang that sent pain through his wrists and elbows. 1 floor was behind him. 11 remained. After several floors, sweat gathered at his temples. His knees ached with a deep grinding pain that lived in the bone, the kind decades of living place inside a body and never remove. His breathing became heavier and shorter. Each exhale formed a faint cloud in the chilled stairwell. Farther down, his shoulders began to burn. The muscles in his lower back tightened into knots. Everett paused on a landing and leaned against the wall. He closed his eyes long enough to feel the cold concrete press through the thin fabric of his uniform. Then he opened them, gripped the cart, and continued. On another landing, one of the trash bags split. Leftover food, half-eaten appetizers, soaked napkins, shrimp tails, and bread crusts, drenched in champagne, spilled across the concrete. Everett stood over the mess alone. It was the waste from a celebration he had not been welcome to enter, spread around his feet in a stairwell where nobody could see him. He knelt. His knees struck the cold concrete. Everett picked up every item by hand. 1 shrimp tail, 1 soaked napkin, 1 piece of bread at a time. He returned everything to the torn bag, pulled the plastic together, and tied the opening shut with a tight knot. He wiped his hands against his work pants and stood. In the upper corner of the landing, a small security camera recorded everything. Its red light blinked quietly. That footage would soon matter more than anyone upstairs could imagine. While Everett hauled more than 100 pounds of waste down the stairs alone, Preston returned to the bar and enjoyed the attention. His jacket was unbuttoned. His watch caught the chandelier light as he swirled a glass of scotch and retold the story as though it were the funniest moment of his life. "You should have seen his face," Preston said, standing there with sauce all over his shirt like a lost dog. Mallory leaned against the bar and stirred her drink with a cocktail straw. "I thought he was going to cry." His mouth was trembling. "That is how you manage people like that," Preston replied casually, as though offering professional advice. "Give them an inch, and they begin thinking they own the building. You have to remind them where they stand every single time." Mallory touched her glass against his. "Cheers to that." Soon afterward, Preston called the overnight operations supervisor, Trevor Shaw, a man who had worked at Meridian Tower for 8 years. "Trevor, this is Preston Vance. I need you to prepare a disciplinary report for a member of the janitorial staff, Everett Cole, badge number 4212. Silence followed on the other end. "What am I writing him up for?" "Unauthorized presence on a restricted floor during a private event. Failure to follow service protocols. Disruptive conduct." Trevor paused again, this time longer. "Preston, the catering team called him to the floor. I approved the request myself. Mr. Cole has worked here without a single complaint. I do not care if he has been here since the building opened. Write the report. Mark it as a final warning, and attach a recommendation for termination." Trevor said nothing for several seconds. Then he answered quietly, "Yes, sir." Preston ended the call without thanking him. He slipped the telephone into his jacket and picked up his drink. Lenora Bishop had watched him from across the room. She had not tasted her wine or joined another conversation. She stood beside the windows in her navy gown with the city lights reflected behind her. Her face remained composed, but beneath that composure was absolute fury. She crossed the ballroom toward Preston. Her heels struck the marble in sharp, precise steps like a clock counting down. "Mr. Vance." Preston turned, and his expression changed instantly. The casual cruelty disappeared, replaced by warm eyes and executive charm. "Mrs. Bishop, it is wonderful to see you. Are you enjoying the evening? What you did was disgraceful." His smile froze. "Excuse me, what you did to that man, the things you said, the garbage your employees threw at him. It was disgraceful, and you know it." Preston's jaw tightened, though he forced the smile to remain. "With all respect, Mrs. Bishop, you do not understand building operations. That employee was in a place where he did not belong. I was maintaining event protocol. Lenora stepped closer and lowered her voice. Every word landed with the weight of stone. I know cruelty when I see it, Mr. Vance. I attended events in this building before you had a title. I also know the history of Meridian Tower far better than you think. Preston's smile flickered. He began to answer, but a major donor approached from the side. Preston immediately turned, restored his polished mask, extended his hand, and greeted the donor as though Lenora were no longer standing there. Lenora watched him for another moment. Then she walked to a quiet area beside the coat check, took out her telephone, and placed a call. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Russell, this is Lenora. Something happened at the gala that you need to hear. It involves Everett." Several miles away, Russell Dane, Chief Operating Officer of Cole Holdings Group, sat inside his Lincoln Park home with a glass of red wine and a book resting on his lap. When Lenora's name appeared on the screen, he answered immediately. "Lenora, what happened?" She told him everything. She described Preston's insults, the plate thrown toward Everett, the food and sauce covering his uniform, the napkin striking his back and face, the blocked elevator, the order to push an overloaded cart down 12 floors, and the false disciplinary report. Russell's face turned pale. He set down the wine glass and his hand began to shake. "They did what to him?" "You heard me, Russell. Does Preston Vance know who Everett Cole is?" Lenora paused. "Clearly, he does not." Russell closed his eyes. When he opened them, all warmth had disappeared from his expression. What remained was cold, focused, and absolute. "I am making calls. Do not leave the building." Russell stood, loosened his collar, and contacted the people who could act immediately. Camille Rhodes, Chief Legal Officer, answered on the first ring. Grant Ellis, Chief Financial Officer, picked up soon afterward. Valerie Knox, Vice President of Human Resources, was already getting into her car before Russell had finished explaining. Lionel Brooks, a member of the board, gave a simple answer. "I am coming." Miriam Caldwell, another board member and respected philanthropist, responded with quiet disbelief. How dare they? Each person received the same message in Russell's controlled voice. Someone just threw garbage at the chairman. Get to Meridian Tower now. Everett finally reached the basement. The stairwell door groaned as he pushed it open. He guided the cart along the maintenance corridor and into a small room without windows. Shelves of cleaning supplies lined the walls. A boiler hummed on the other side of the concrete, and one bare bulb hung from the ceiling. Everett parked the cart in a corner and locked the wheels. He removed his gloves and placed them on a shelf. Then he sat on an overturned bucket. The plastic creaked beneath his weight. Everett took off his glasses, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, and released a long, slow breath. It was the breath of a man who had kept too much inside for too long. He reached into his back pocket and removed an old leather wallet, worn soft by years of use. From it, Everett pulled a small photograph with curled edges. The picture showed him as a younger man, strong jaw, wide smile, hard hat on his head, and rolled blueprints beneath one arm. Behind him, the steel skeleton of a skyscraper rose into a clear sky. Someone had written a few words on the back in faded ink. First brick, first dream, Everett Cole. He studied the photograph for a long time and traced one edge with his thumb. Then he returned it to the wallet, placed the wallet in his pocket, and stood. Everett straightened the uniform, brushed at the dried sauce, and adjusted the identification badge on his chest. He could have revealed the truth upstairs at any moment. One sentence would have ended Preston's performance immediately. But Everett had spent his life believing something most people never learn. A person's character is not proven when a title is announced. It is revealed by what that person does when no title is visible. 3 black sport utility vehicles pulled up outside Meridian Tower. 6 people stepped onto the sidewalk in rapid succession. Russell Dane, Chief Operating Officer. Camille Rhodes, Chief Legal Officer. Grant Ellis, Chief Financial Officer. Valerie Knox, Vice President of Human Resources. Lionel Brooks, Board Member. Miriam Caldwell, Board Member and Philanthropist. They entered the main lobby in suits and business attire, carrying briefcases and moving in a tight, silent formation. Their urgency made the guards stand straighter, and the front desk employees stop in the middle of their conversations. Darius Webb rose from the security desk when he saw them. "They expect you on the 40th floor," he said. Then he lowered his voice. "Mr. Cole is downstairs. Russell did not hesitate. We are going to him first. The group entered the freight elevator. The same elevator Everett used every working day, the one that smelled of floor cleaner and industrial polish. The doors opened onto the basement corridor, bare concrete walls, a humming boiler, one fluorescent tube flickering overhead. They found Everett in the maintenance room with the sauce stain still across his uniform and his glasses in one hand. He looked up. 6 senior leaders stood among the mops, buckets, and trash bags, staring at him with expressions caught somewhere between rage and grief. Russell spoke first. His voice was thick. "Everett, we heard what happened." Everett put his glasses back on. "I am all right, Russell. It is not the first time." Miriam stepped forward. Her jaw was tight and anger burned in her eyes. "It will be the last time." Camille opened her briefcase. "As your legal counsel, I need you to know that we already secured the security recordings from every relevant camera on the 40th floor and inside the stairwell. We have Lenora Bishop's eyewitness statement. We also have the electronic record showing that Preston ordered a false disciplinary report through Trevor in operations." She paused. "This is clear hostile workplace conduct with unmistakable racial bias, and every part of it is documented." Everett looked at Camille, then Russell, and finally the others. "What do you want to do?" Russell extended one hand. "Come with us." They led Everett through the basement corridor, past the boiler room, storage cages, and loading dock, until they reached a door most employees did not know existed. Behind it stood a private elevator with keycard access, brushed steel doors, and a mahogany interior. It was the executive elevator, connected directly to the 41st floor. Russell used his card, and the doors opened. All 7 people stepped inside. Everett remained in the gray janitor's uniform. Sauce stained the chest. His work badge stayed clipped to the pocket. The elevator carried them upward in silence. When the doors opened, Everett stepped into a hallway with mahogany walls, oil paintings, soft lighting, and polished hardwood floors. At the end of the hallway, beside a pair of double doors, a brass nameplate was mounted to the wall. Everett T. Cole, founder and chairman, Cole Holdings Group. Russell opened a nearby closet and removed a tailored navy suit jacket. He held it toward Everett. Everett looked at the jacket and shook his head. "I will go back as I am." Russell nodded and returned the jacket to the closet. They traveled down 1 floor together. The elevator opened directly into the gala hall. The event was still underway. The quartet played, glasses clinked, and donors stood in carefully arranged groups. Preston was near the front of the ballroom, holding a microphone and offering a toast to the guests for their extraordinary generosity. Then the elevator doors opened. Everett entered the room in the center of 6 of the most powerful people in the company. 3 walked on his left. 3 walked on his right. Every executive wore a suit and carried a stone-faced expression. Everett remained in the middle, wearing the gray janitor's uniform with a dark sauce stain across the chest. Preston noticed them first. His voice disappeared in the middle of the toast. The champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. His mouth remained open, but no sound came out. Russell walked forward. He did not take the microphone. He did not need one. His voice carried across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting. I would like to introduce a person most of you should already recognize. This is Everett T. Cole, founder of Cole Holdings Group, owner of Meridian Tower, and chairman of the board responsible for every operation in this building, including the event taking place tonight." Silence covered the room. 300 people stood without moving. Preston's face lost all color. His hand began to shake, and the champagne trembled inside his glass. Behind him, Mallory's wine glass slipped from her fingers. It struck the marble and shattered. Red wine spread across the white floor like an open wound. Everett stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. 2 years ago, I stepped away from daily operations and began working as a janitor in my own building. I wanted to learn how this company treated the people who keep its lights on. Everett paused and let his eyes move slowly across the ballroom. Tonight, I received my answer. Nobody spoke. Near the back of the room, Lenora pressed one hand over her mouth. Tears moved down her face, and she did not wipe them away. Preston's mouth began moving before his thoughts had caught up. "Mr. Cole, I had no idea. If I had known who you were, I never would have." "That is exactly the problem, Preston." Everett's voice remained quiet and level. "You should not need to know who a person is before deciding to treat that person like a human being." The sentence landed across the room like a hammer striking glass. Sweat formed along Preston's hairline. He loosened his tie with one finger and tried again. "Sir, this was a misunderstanding. I was only trying to maintain the event's procedures." "Mr. Vance," Camille said as she stepped forward. Every syllable came out sharp, precise, and final. "We have 42 minutes of security recordings. The footage shows you throwing a plate toward Mr. Cole, covering his uniform with food, directing staff members to throw garbage at him, blocking his access to the elevator, and ordering a fraudulent disciplinary report with a termination recommendation, even though he had been authorized to work on this floor. We also have 6 eyewitness statements. I strongly advise you to stop speaking." Preston closed his mouth. His face had shifted from pale to gray. Mallory took half a step backward. "I was not involved," she said. "I was only standing nearby." Her voice cracked. Valerie Knox turned toward her. "Miss Pierce, the recordings show you laughing, encouraging Mr. Vance, questioning Mr. Cole's authorization, and attempting to prevent Mrs. Bishop from intervening. You are equally responsible." Mallory opened her mouth, but no words came. Her hands trembled beside her. Russell moved to the center of the room. Effective immediately, Preston Vance and Mallory Pierce are suspended without pay, while a complete internal investigation is conducted. Security will escort both of you from the property. Darius Webb approached from the rear of the ballroom. I was the same guard who greeted Everett warmly whenever he entered through the service doors. Darius stopped in front of Preston and Mallory and gestured toward the exit. He did not need to say anything. Preston stared at him. His jaw tightened. For a moment, it appeared that he might object. Instead, he lowered his eyes and walked toward the doors. Mallory followed a few steps behind, her heels clicking unevenly against the marble. Every guest watched them leave. The doors closed. One person began clapping. The applause was slow and steady. Another person joined, then another, until the whole ballroom erupted. The chandeliers seemed to tremble beneath the sound. Everett raised one hand. The room became quiet. "I did not come here for applause," he said. "I came here to remove the garbage." He paused, and the faintest smile appeared. "It seems I have done that in more ways than one." Warm, restrained laughter passed through the room, releasing some of the tension that had tightened every chest. Everett walked toward Lenora. She stood near the windows with tears on her face and both hands pressed against her heart. He took her hands in his. "Lenora, thank you. You were the only person in this room who saw a man instead of a uniform." She released a laugh that became half a sob. "Everett, you stubborn fool. Why did you not simply tell them who you were?" His expression remained warm, steady, and unbroken. "Because I needed to know who they were." The gala ended, but the consequences had only begun. At the start of the next business week, Cole Holdings Group opened a complete internal investigation. Camille Rhodes led the review personally, working beside an independent human resources firm brought in from outside the company. No department inside Meridian Tower was allowed to control the process. No manager could remove a document, close a complaint, edit an electronic record, or influence a witness. Nobody would bury the truth this time. The investigators collected every email Preston had sent during the previous 3 years. They reviewed internal memoranda, performance reports, staffing instructions, disciplinary actions, and every complaint that had ever carried his name. They also examined the responses, or the absence of responses, from the departments that had been responsible for protecting employees. What they discovered was worse than any member of the board had expected. 12 formal complaints had been filed against Preston during those 3 years. 12 complaints from 12 different employees. Every complainant was a person of color. A black security guard had been written up for having an attitude after asking Preston to say please when giving an order. A Latina catering employee had been reassigned to the basement kitchen after Preston claimed her accent made donors uncomfortable. A black maintenance worker had been denied a promotion that Preston personally blocked without offering any documented reason. Other employees described public humiliation, selective punishment, racist jokes disguised as management humor, and assignments designed to keep certain workers away from wealthy visitors. 12 people had spoken. Their reports were dismissed, minimized, or placed in a filing cabinet no one had opened in years. Each complaint represented a moment when somebody had found enough courage to tell the truth. Each buried report represented a choice by somebody else not to listen. The investigation into Mallory Pierce produced its own disturbing record. Her internal emails told the story in words she had written herself. She instructed event coordinators to keep diverse service workers away from the main floor during donor gatherings. She sent a message to the catering manager stating that employees visible to guests should reflect the donor base. Those were her exact words. When an employee asked why she had not been invited to a company holiday celebration, Mallory replied that the decision was about optics and was nothing personal. Nothing personal. Investigators found the same phrase in 4 separate messages. Every time she used it, the harm had been deeply personal to the person excluded. The independent review reached a unanimous conclusion. Preston Vance and Mallory Pierce were terminated for cause. Preston lost his annual salary of $200,000. His stock options, valued at more than $600,000, were forfeited. The company health plan, reserved parking space, executive benefits, and corner office on the 38th floor disappeared with his employment. He left Meridian Tower carrying a single cardboard box, while 2 security officers walked beside him. Employees watched from behind glass walls as the man who had once strutted through the building lowered his head and crossed the lobby. Mallory was escorted out on the same day. Her contract contained a non-competition clause that prevented her from working in donor relations, event management, or corporate communications for another firm in Illinois for 18 months. Her LinkedIn profile disappeared before the evening ended, but the story could not remain sealed inside Meridian Tower. A few days after the terminations, Audrey Lane, a reporter at a Chicago television station, received an anonymous tip. She made telephone calls, reviewed public records, contacted witnesses, and confirmed the details. Her report carried a headline that drew immediate attention. Billionaire founder works as janitor in his own building. Employees throw garbage at him. The segment aired during the evening news. Before the night ended, it had been shared 400,000 times. By the following morning, national networks were discussing it. Before the public attention faded, the footage had been viewed more than 35 million times and continued spreading. Everett authorized the release of selected security recordings. People saw Preston throw the plate toward the cart. They saw the food strike Everett's uniform. They watched a napkin hit his back and another strike his face. They watched him pull the overloaded cart through the stairwell and kneel alone to gather the spilled waste. The camera did not exaggerate, explain, or defend. It simply showed what happened. The image of Preston throwing garbage at Everett became larger than one incident inside one company. Editorials appeared across the country. National commentators discussed the treatment of service workers, racial discrimination hidden inside corporate culture, and the dangerous difference between public charity and private behavior. A question began circulating widely. Do you know who cleans your building? The phrase remained one of the most discussed topics on social media for nearly a week. Everett agreed to one interview, only one. He sat with Audrey Lane inside the lobby of Meridian Tower. He wore a simple gray shirt, close in appearance to the uniform but without the company badge. He sat in a folding chair with his hands calmly joined. Everett did not attack Preston by name. He did not celebrate the public humiliation of the people who had harmed him. He did not perform anger for the camera. He spoke steadily. I have been a black man in America for 68 years. What happened to me inside this building was not unusual. The unusual part is that I had enough power to do something about it. Most people treated that way do not. That is the part that should keep all of us awake. Legal consequences followed. Preston was charged with workplace harassment and filing a fraudulent disciplinary report. He entered a plea of no contest. The court ordered him to complete 200 hours of community service at a homeless shelter on Chicago's South Side, along with 18 months of mandatory counseling focused on discrimination and workplace conduct. Mallory faced civil liability for helping create and maintain a hostile work environment. She settled the case outside court. The financial amount remained confidential. As part of the agreement, she was required to issue a written public apology. The apology was published in 3 Chicago newspapers and read aloud during a company-wide meeting inside Meridian Tower. Trevor Shaw, the overnight supervisor, resigned after the investigation ended. He had not thrown the plate. He had not laughed or tossed a napkin. But when Preston ordered him to create a dishonest report, Trevor had finally said yes, sir, even though he knew the order was wrong. Everett personally wrote him a letter of recommendation. Some board members questioned that choice. Everett explained that Trevor had hesitated. He had challenged Preston's accusation and stated that Everett had been authorized to work at the gala. The hesitation had not been enough to stop the harm, but it showed that Trevor's conscience had not disappeared completely. Everett believed that moment mattered. He did not excuse the decision. He allowed room for a person to learn from it. Several weeks after the gala, Everett held a press conference in the Meridian Tower lobby. He stood at a podium beside Darius Webb, 2 maintenance employees, and 3 members of the overnight cleaning crew. Every one of them wore a work uniform. Everett announced a new set of reforms across Cole Holdings Group. The company would create an anonymous reporting system for discrimination and workplace abuse. Every employee, from a senior executive to a newly hired janitor, could use it. Reports would be examined by an independent review board with authority to investigate management. Every staff member would complete dignity in the workplace training, beginning with the most senior leaders rather than the lowest paid employees. Everett also announced a $5 million scholarship fund named after his late mother, Lillian Cole. The fund would help young people from underserved communities pursue education and training in business, skilled trades, maintenance, engineering, security, and building operations. Then Everett announced another change. Every service-level employee, including janitors, maintenance workers, and security guards, would receive a 15% pay increase. From that point forward, those workers would be invited to company celebrations as guests, not merely assigned to clean, serve, or guard them. As guests, Everett looked toward the cameras, then toward Darius and the cleaning crew beside him. "These are the people who built this company," he said. "Not only the people inside the boardroom, the people who arrive before the lights come on and remain after everyone else has gone home." Over the months that followed, Meridian Tower became a different place. The marble walls did not change. The chandeliers were not brighter, and the lobby did not become larger. The difference was something visitors could not photograph. They felt it when they entered. Every new employee heard the same message during orientation. The human resources trainer would pause, look around the room, and say, "Treat every person in this building with respect. You never know who may be watching." Then the trainer would add the more important sentence, "It should not matter whether anyone is watching." Darius Webb was promoted to Director of Facility Operations. His new office stood on the 32nd floor. His name appeared on the door, and his compensation finally reflected the responsibilities he had carried for years. Yet whenever Everett entered through the service entrance, Darius still looked up, smiled, and greeted him the same way. "Evening, Mr. Cole." Some things did not need to change. The good things should not. Lenora Bishop joined the Horizon Foundation's board. Her first action was to conduct a complete review of staffing policies for every charitable event. No service worker would again be treated as invisible inside a room that worker helped create. Lenora examined the new rules personally, line by line and policy by policy. Preston completed his 200 hours of community service at a shelter on Chicago's South Side. He arrived when scheduled and followed instructions. He mopped floors, sorted donated clothing, emptied trash containers, and served meals to people who looked nothing like the donors he once charmed. Months later, a local newspaper published a small interview with him. Preston offered one sentence worth remembering. "I spent my entire career looking upward. I never stopped to look around me." That statement did not transform him into a hero. One moment of understanding could not erase 12 complaints. It could not restore the promotions he blocked, the workers he humiliated, or the voices that were ignored for years. Preston did not become a good man merely because consequences forced him to see what he had refused to see before. How was a man who had finally run out of places to hide? Still, recognizing the truth was better than continuing to deny it. Whether he built a better life from that understanding would depend on the choices he made after the cameras and court orders were gone. One quiet morning in the spring, before the sun had risen, the Meridian Tower lobby stood empty. There were no guests, donors, reporters, or cameras. Only the soft hum of the heating system and the faint smell of lemon floor cleaner filled the space. Everett stood in the center of the lobby with a mop in his hands. He wore gray pants, a gray work shirt, and the same badge clipped to his chest. He moved the mop in slow, even strokes across the marble floor. The wet surface reflected the glow of the emergency exit signs. Behind him hung 2 framed photographs. The first was the old black and white image from the building's groundbreaking ceremony. It showed a young Everett wearing a hard hat, standing before the construction site with blueprints beneath one arm. The second photograph was new and in color. It had been taken on the night of the gala. Everett stood in the center of the 40th floor wearing the stained janitor's uniform. Russell, Camille, Grant, Valerie, Lionel, and Miriam stood beside him. Every executive looked toward Everett with the expression, "People carry for someone who earned their respect long before the photograph was taken." A small brass plate had been mounted beneath the pictures. "Character is what you do when no one knows your name." Everett paused and rested both hands on the mop handle. He studied the young man in the hard hat and the older man in the stained uniform. The same eyes, the same steady hands, the same belief that dignity is not something a person wears. It is something a person carries. Everett smiled. It was a small, private smile that required no witness. Then he returned to the floor and continued mopping. The deepest lesson in Everett's story is not that the janitor secretly happened to be the most powerful person in the building. The lesson is that his ownership should never have mattered. Preston's cruelty would have been wrong if Everett had possessed no money, no title, and no influence. A uniform tells us what work a person is doing in a particular moment. It cannot tell us the value of that person, the life they have lived, the sacrifices they have made, or the dreams they carry home after a shift. The person cleaning a room may have built a company. The guard checking identification may be raising a future nurse. The caterer carrying plates may be studying after work or supporting an entire family. Even when there is no surprising identity waiting to be revealed, each person deserves basic respect. Kindness is most honest when it is offered before we know what someone can do for us. Respect that appears only after a title is announced is not genuine respect. It is fear of power dressed up as courtesy. Everett could have revealed his identity immediately, but he chose to watch. He wanted to know who people became when they believed the person in front of them could not affect their careers. Some laughed. Some looked away. Some followed Preston's example because they wanted his approval. Lenora stepped forward. Darius had treated Everett warmly every evening without knowing the full truth. Trevor hesitated before obeying an unethical order. Those different choices remind us that a harmful culture is rarely created by one cruel person alone. It grows when others reward the cruelty, imitate it, excuse it, or remain silent because speaking feels uncomfortable. Silence may seem neutral to the person who chooses it, but it never feels neutral to the person standing alone. The staff members in the ballroom did not throw the first plate, yet their laughter gave Preston permission to continue. The donors who turned away may have believed the incident was none of their business. To Everett, their silence became part of the humiliation. Speaking up does not always require a dramatic confrontation. It can begin with one clear sentence. "That is not acceptable." It can mean refusing to laugh, standing beside the person being targeted, recording what happened, reporting an abuse honestly, or declining an order that violates another person's dignity. Small acts of courage can stop a cruel moment before it becomes a pattern. The story also reminds us that accountability and compassion can exist together. Everett made certain that Preston and Mallory faced serious consequences. He did not protect their positions, erase the evidence, or accept excuses offered only after his identity was known. I understood that forgiveness without responsibility can become another form of silence. At the same time, he wrote a recommendation for Trevor, because he saw the difference between a person who had built a pattern of abuse and someone who failed in a fearful moment, but still showed signs of conscience. That did not erase Trevor's choice. It recognized the possibility that a person can learn, accept responsibility, and act differently next time. Second chances should not be automatic, and they should never be used to place wounded people in danger. But when remorse is sincere and repair is possible, a second chance can turn shame into better behavior. The reforms at Cole Holdings mattered because punishment alone could not heal the company. Removing Preston and Mallory stopped two people from causing more harm, but the buried complaints proved that the system itself had also failed. Real change required new reporting methods, independent review, fair pay, honest training, and policies that treated service workers as part of the organization rather than background scenery. A company does not prove its values through a slogan printed in a lobby. It proves them through the experience of the person with the least power in the room. Everett also showed that leadership is not about remaining above difficult work. He returned to the mop even after everyone knew his name. He did not clean the lobby because he needed a disguise anymore. He did it because he believed no honest work was beneath him. That belief separated him from Preston more clearly than wealth or title ever could. Preston spent his career looking upward, trying to impress people with more influence. Everett looked around. He learned names, remembered children, and noticed the people most others ignored. One man chased status, the other built trust. Only one of those things remained when the truth came out. So treat the janitor with the same dignity you would offer the chief executive officer. Treat the waitress, guard, driver, cleaner, assistant, and maintenance worker as people whose time, safety, and pride matter. Do not do it because one of them might secretly own the building. Do it because every person already owns a life as complicated, valuable, and deserving of care as your own. When you witness humiliation, do not wait for someone more powerful to object. You may be the only person in the room who can make another human being feel seen. When you make a mistake, acknowledge it before consequences force the truth from you. When you hold authority, use it to protect dignity rather than demand submission. And when you have the chance to change a broken system, do more than remove the person who was caught. Repair the conditions that allowed the harm to continue. A title can be printed on a door. A salary can disappear. An office can be emptied. And applause can fade before the next morning. Character remains. It appears in the choices made when no camera is recording, no donor is watching, and no one knows whether the person holding the mop has the power to answer back. Respect everyone. No exceptions. Ever.